that huge scar on her back. That looks to me like it's June's mom. Haven't seen her in a while, so it's really nice to see her back at the den. There, that deep scar across her back. Probably from a very lucky escape from a lion, or possibly inflicted by other hyenas. We've seen her involved in skirmishes before, quite seriously involved. Nice to see her looking very full and very healthy, and here to look after June as well. Definitely an old hyena. And with all of their cheek, you can imagine the answer to Marlowe's question. Marlowe was wondering, would a hyena actually run off another animal? So basically chase them out of the den site in order to occupy it. I'm pretty sure that if something like a family of warthogs, for example, was living in a den site that was already established as theirs, there's a very, very good chance that the hyenas will actually chase them away. They might even kick porcupines out of their burrow. Got the cub by the back of the neck. It's fascinating to watch them learn fighting techniques. Grabbing the back of the neck to avoid those nipping teeth. Not impressed. You can see how with the sub-adults, they've already got their adult teeth. What are you coming to do? Hello, November. Under the car again. Straight under the car. And now I'm going to try and duck. I don't even think you can. You can't see them from where you are. They're all underneath the front wheel. There we go. They're moving out away from us. Try and keep my head out of the way. The hyena den's keeping Dave very busy. But you can see there's a tremendous difference, which is what I want to try and show you. But they're just so busy being busy that they're making it a bit more difficult. But whenever we see them, just have a look at the difference in terms of the milk teeth of the little ones compared to the adult crushing weapons of power. Here you go. Straight across in front again. I think this time I really... Oh, no, I was going to leave, but November was underneath my wheels. There's just hyena cubs everywhere. It's going to be even more entertaining when Madam's cubs actually get to the stage where they decide to come and investigate us as well. Then we're going to have 3 sets of mischiefs to deal with, plus the sub-adults that are still a bit brave. Remember how in the beginning the November and the December twins took such a long time to be brave enough to come out and about and explore. Oh. Trying to chew on. Sorry, I'll try and keep my head out of the way. That's interesting from Judy. Judy was wondering if I had heard about the wild dog attack on the scar-backed female. I'd heard about the wild dog attack. I had not heard about the fact that it was the female with the scar on her back. I'm trying to see now, already she's healed up. It's miraculous, the healing power of these animals. She doesn't seem to have any serious injuries, but thanks, Julia. I didn't realize it was her, but I did hear another one racing up to come underneath the car. I did hear about the attack. It's very, very common for hyenas and wild dogs to actually encounter each other, more common than we get to actually see the interaction take place. And what I've learned over the last few months is that it's very rare for the hyenas to be killed by the wild dogs. It does happen, but it's very unusual. Most of the time, they do exactly what that hyena did in that attack, which is back into a bush and bare their teeth and get a couple of nips and some nasty bites, but nothing that will result in their death or anything close to a very serious injury. That, of course, depends on the situation as well as the number of wild dogs. It's so interesting the way that they vie for the top predators and top predator spot. Now, I think I might steal this opportunity to try and remove myself from the hyena den. I'm hoping there's no cubs underneath the car. As soon as I turn on, though, we'll find out. I think I've accounted for all of them, though. And while I do that, let's find out what James is up to.
We've come back to quarantine clearings now just to see if we can't see a little baby, tiny little zebra. But I don't see anything here at the moment. Quarantine is devoid of animals, as of course will happen as we head towards, it's certainly not getting hot yet, but as we move towards the middle of the morning, the zebra tend to wander off into the woodland, as do the impala, and then they come out into these clearings, of course, during the course of the night in order to see what's going on. But let's just do a little turn around here. I'm sorry we lost signal there. It just seems to be the way of things with Wendy at the moment. Like I say, she just returned from a prolonged sojourn to Pretoria, and we need to just refine her a little bit further. Jigger is now also in Pretoria. Right, now, Jody, you are Zumi Jody. You have read that a zebra cannot see any other zebra for up to 12 to 24 hours because it needs to imprint its mother's stripe pattern. I can categorically tell you that that is nonsense because I saw it yesterday where the zebra little baby was surrounded by the rest of the herd for a little while. Definitely saw them. Whether it imprinted the stripe pattern or not, I don't know. I don't buy that stripe pattern imprinting thing unless I see evidence of it. I'm afraid I won't believe it, and I'll tell you why. It's because I don't understand why it would be necessary when you have things like impala which look identical to each other. They can recognize each other's lambs easily. The lambs can recognize their mothers easily. Why would it be the case that an animal would evolve a strategy for its foal to recognize the mother where it had to remain isolated from the rest of the herd for 12 to 24 hours, which is of course incredibly risky behavior because it means that you are on your own and you've only got your eyes to look. It would be incredibly risky and incredibly, seemingly evolutionarily stupid strategy when smell, or I don't know how else they do it, but maybe just smell is the most obvious way for a youngster to find its mother. So I'm afraid I don't buy that theory, Zumi Jody. I've read it as well many times. I've yet to see it. I can't believe it. I think there are lots and lots of people trying desperately to figure out why on earth zebras have stripes. Ravi, you're in New York, and this is another great question. You want to know if I believe herbivores are able to discern or switch off their reproductive instincts on the basis of the fact that there's not enough food to eat and therefore, just kind of save themselves. Ravi, no, I don't really. I mean, we'll see coming up with the impala rut. Maybe it's possible. I think what would happen, though, is that if an animal is in nutritional stress, as any of the animals out here will be, and so will, by the time the impala mating comes around in May, then obviously their physiology is not going to function in the same way as it might. And what we'll find is that they may well then not come into estrus. Maybe some of them won't come into estrus as much. Maybe some of them won't fall pregnant because the endometrium will not be sufficiently thickened for a fetus to start growing. There's a little giraffe, very little giraffe, trying desperately to try and walk around. Oh, this is my favorite giraffe here. He's got those little paintbrushes on the top of his head. Look at him with his little paintbrushes. And Ravi, while we just talking about that, of course, there was this great misnomer, and I guarantee you it's still being told as we sit here, that impala are able to withhold giving birth until favorable conditions. So they have their standard issue 6.5 to 7 months gestation period, and then if the rains haven't come yet, they'll simply hold the youngsters in the womb until it rains. Now, this doesn't make any biological sense whatsoever. And mean, I'm 99% sure it's not true. And the reason it was sort of thought to be true was because there is a second impala lambing season or breeding season, and some impala will only give birth in February, and we've seen one or two very little impala running around with the other slightly larger lambs. So Ravi, I think it's stories like that that have given rise to the thought that herbivores are able to perhaps prolong or make a conscious decision or make a subconscious physiological decision to hold off having babies and mating. And I'm afraid I just don't buy it myself. But that said, of course, like I say, if an animal is in nutritional stress, then it is definitely going to struggle to A, carry a baby to term, and B, perhaps even become impregnated. Like I say, the complex process of laying down endometrial layer or inner lining to the womb and then implanting an embryo in that, I'm sure would be compromised by not enough to eat. Now, Gendre, I was attacked recently. It was a very painful attack that I had. Can you see my attack, Gendre? Now, I don't have much leg to attack, but that great wound there that you can see, everybody, was from a blister beetle. A blister beetle crawled upon me. I think I slapped him or scraped him with my other foot, and he then spread his cantharidin, a foul substance that irritated my skin deeply. And look at that. I thought it would just go away. It turned out into a blister, and now it has turned into a gaping, festering wound that might result in the amputation of my ankle. I just thought you should all see that, because I felt the need for sympathy. Kirsten says she's going to bring out the violins, but she's had enough of me and she'd like to see some zebra with Jamie. So let's go across there and we'll see what else we can find.
Seems as though today is a zebra day. To change the subject from James's grievous injury, we've got a wonderful stallion and his harem. A dazzle of zebra is the correct collective noun for a group of zebra like this, which I think is perfect because this is quite a dazzling sight in the morning light. I wanted to talk about, it's so nice because they're actually going to, I think if we sit nice, we keep our movements nice and slow, they're going to come right up to us and right past us. Now, watching these two little ones, I actually wanted to talk to you a little bit about the sighting that Brent and myself had in Kruger yesterday around a waterhole. There's a very large zebra herd that wandered through and were coming down to drink. And in the process, because there were wildebeest and impala as well, in the process and in the rush, thirsty rush forward to get to water, one of the zebra foals became separated and got lost at the back of the group. And it stood on the top of the hill calling repeatedly that yip, 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 yip sound that zebras make. And what was so fascinating about it is that it wasn't the mother that called back, it was the other zebra foals within the herd itself. So obviously there's quite a tight bond, not just between the offspring and their mothers, but also between the different foals within the herd. It also went to show that that imprinting process on the mom takes a little bit of time, and that the herding instinct is incredibly powerful, because this little zebra was so confused that it ended up trying to approach a female wildebeest in the hope of some comfort, and ended up following her away from the zebra herd for a long distance before working out that in fact this was not its family, and maybe kind of worked out that there was a severe lack of stripes in that particular group of animals, and went racing back. That's interesting, because apparently James has observed exactly the same thing, that zebra foals don't have to imprint on their, or don't imprint on their mothers as quickly as we think they do. That being said, I have seen some serious aggression from mares that have been approached by a foal that is not their own. And we've seen before how vicious zebra can actually be. They'll bite and they'll kick. So it's important for that foal, whilst the imprinting doesn't happen instantly, it's important for that foal to be quick on its toes in terms of recognizing its mom. It's a very strictly enforced hierarchy within a zebra herd itself. Hello, little one. There we go. Coming right up next to the car. Such a peaceful sighting. And I think we're actually going to see more and more zebras pushing in from the southern end of Kruger. From what I observed yesterday, there is very little to the east of us that they can actually feed on in terms of grass. It's all been either drought-stricken or consumed by animals moving through. That's why we're going to see more and more buffalo and zebra. They're pushing in from Kruger to where there's water and to where there's a little bit of food for them. They're going to move with the rains. Our zebra is still in good condition. What we'll start to see over the next few months as food gets harder and harder to find is their manes are going to start to flop over. And that is the sign of a very sick zebra. And just to discuss, and actually I should have done this ages ago, but James Richard, just to finish off the answer to your question about if Brent and myself saw anything interesting in Kruger, we did. We had the most amazing time. We saw lots of Kori bustards, which is the heaviest flying bird in the world at 17 kilograms. That is disputed. I know that there is dispute about that. But at about 17 kilograms, which equates to about 35 to close to 40 pounds, they are definitely one of the heaviest flying birds. Oh, a little bit of a skirmish there. Somebody's going to get a kick. You can see what I mean. They're not always the friendliest creatures to each other. Little zebra. James, we also saw Sesame, which is a first for me, and I think actually Brent said it was a first for him as well in the Kruger Park. Sesame is a type of antelope, pretty much the closest relative that you could see here. We could always see them here. Of course, it's open to the Kruger, but the closest relative would probably be the wildebeest. It's all part of the hartebeest family. So we saw two sesames. We saw eland up in the north, which is also incredible to see. It's our largest antelope, and in fact the largest antelope in the world. Oh, they're having a serious disagreement now. Let me duck my head down. They all got in each other's space. They weren't very impressed. What else did we see? We saw lots of ground hornbills. Not as many elephants as I was expecting. I was quite surprised. We saw a cheetah. We saw wild dogs, and in fact we think we saw the Orphan pack, for those of you familiar with the different animals around here. And the Orphan pack is one of the animals that we could actually get to see. We could see the Orphan wild dog pack. It's one of the biggest, in fact the biggest wild dog pack within the park. There's 35 animals. They were hiding out in a drainage line in the shade. What else did we see? We saw lions, and the awesome thing about that lion sighting was about 4 cars had driven past those lions without spotting them. He was right next to the road underneath a bush when we went past. Oh, they're still in each other's space. What's going on? Not enjoying each other's company. Could also be a young male that's getting to the stage where he's going to be time for him to leave the herd. Yep, I think that's what that is. That young male on the right is getting in everybody's way. He still remains tightly bonded to his mom, but those bonds will have to be broken. Oh. Shame. It's a teenage boy that's slowly being pushed out of the herd, and he's not very popular. One of those sad realities of herd life. You see it with all of the different animal species, all the different general game species, as well as elephants. Awesome sighting, though. That's an interesting question. To sit and watch these zebra, and it's an animal that we are all so familiar with, and for years and years we've been taught that those stripes are camouflage mechanisms, and you can see how it does work. And this is in answer to Keith's question, who's read that zebras' stripes are to confuse predators or to confuse lions, to make it more difficult to single out one individual zebra when they're hunting them and when they're running away. Now you can sort of see how that would work, and it definitely does play a role in camouflage. But Keith, they're really starting to research now more and more into the reason zebras have stripes, because if it was such a perfect camouflage mechanism or disruptive coloration mechanism, why is it that only zebras have it? Why are there no other prey species or general game species that have stripes as camouflage? There they go, they're all going to wander past us here to the right. Keith, they've done a lot of research. The truth is, and it's one of the things that I absolutely love about being out in the bush, is that nobody knows why zebras have stripes. The predominant theory at the moment is that the stripes actually confuse flying insects like tsetse flies that can pass on a sickness known as sleeping sickness. And there is research to suggest that zebra in areas where there are tsetse flies, and there would have been tsetse flies, but they've been pushed out by chemicals produced by humans, but there would have been tsetse flies in this area. And there's evidence to suggest that there are far less on zebra than there are on any of the other animal species. And that's because the shape of the stripes and the black and the white confuses the landing mechanism and the proprioception of the fly, so they can't land on the zebra themselves. There's one other theory, which to me doesn't hold much water. I don't buy into it, and that is that the stripes play a role in thermoregulation. So the black stripes heat up faster than the white stripes, as black and white things do. White reflects and bounces the light back, and that causes essentially microcurrents to flow across the skin of the zebra and essentially cool them down. That to me doesn't really make much sense. I don't buy into that. But I mean, I could be completely wrong. So far, the dominant theory is that stripes are actually an anti-insect mechanism. It's one very pregnant female there. I don't think we're going to get lucky 2 days in a row, but you never know. I've got Dave on the back. Oh, some more running and galloping about. And as our zebra disappear off behind us, I'm going to continue on to search for more dazzling sights. And while I do that, I believe that James has found another different herd of animals to show you.
Breeding herd of buffalo, everybody, but a nervous herd. This herd is not as confiding as some of the other animals of the Sabi Sand Game Reserve. And they are now sort of going to walk around us. There's a little brown-colored one. Did you see that? That's a little baby. And I think the herd is split. There are lots of tracks on the road here, and there were reports of them at the Djuma Dam pan. And I think some of the herd might be there already having a drink, and I'm pretty sure this particular section is on its way there. But it is now astounded by the sight of a Land Rover, or perhaps Gendre's hat. I'm not sure, one of the two, and they are now don't really know what to do. So they're going to hide behind some bushes, pretend to be having an eat, and then think about going to drink. Now, Djuma Dam Pan is to the right of your screen, or sort of right and behind. There's some big old bulls bringing up the rear. And like I say, I mean, Scott's had this experience with this herd. I've had it a few times with this herd. I mean, there are times in the Sabi Sands where you can be sitting in a place like this. So if I'd parked in front of a herd before, they'd just walk either side of you, totally ignore you and keep going. And these guys are just a bit nervous. There are no lions after them, we know that. The Nkahumas are on Simbambili somewhere. A large pride crossed into the Manyeleti from Sydney's dam earlier this morning. There's a little baby one, Genre, maybe you can see it now. That brown-coloured, little chocolate brown-coloured fellow there. There he is, look. They are coming slowly closer. This is not a large group. It's probably only about maybe 50 or 60 of them. I'm sure the rest are having a drink now. Just going to find out from Kirsten if she can see what's actually happening at the Djuma Dam Pan. And if you can see, let us know. #SafariLive, questions at WildEarthTV. And if there are a lot more of them there, then we might go and have a look. They're slowly grazing closer. Now, apparently, Kevin Catfish, you say that the pan is covered in buffalo. I wonder if we shouldn't go there. I think we are going to do that. You know what, Kevin, let's go across to the Djuma Dam pan. Let's let these chaps move towards the water. I'm sure that they will join us there at some stage. Lots and lots of buffalo tracks going down the road. And the way you know they're buffalo tracks, well, it just looks like a herd of cattle have walked down the road. Plenty of dung. And if we just quickly show you to the side there, you can see what look like very large tracks of cows walking down the road, many of them. We're not far from the pan, only about half a minute. Hold on, everybody, to your hats. Road there, that's good to see. Continue to be slightly more heavily used. James Bear, you're worried about where we are. Showing you my pheasantry. Oh, there are lots of buffalo there. I think we're going to put this aside. Sorry about that, everyone. James, the nearest medical facility is in an half-hour drive, but we can get medevac on a helicopter if we have to. Sorry, let me just turn the car properly. Sorry, John. Now, you can see them here staring at us, worried. This group is about, I think, the same size as the other group. I think it might be worth just sitting here to see if they come down. And I mean, one or two of them have come down, they've looked, they've run back up towards the pan. I just don't understand why. Nervous of vehicles, should I say. People I can understand. Let's just watch and what unfolds here. The hippo's obviously gone. But James, if I don't actually need medical attention on my foot, obviously. We have a first aid kit. And I can put a little plaster on if I get very sore. And then for sort of serious events, like, I mean, one of the staff the other day, not one of our staff, had a suspected heart attack. There are people with first aid training here, and then there's a paramedic who's about 45 minutes away, sort of permanently on site at one of the other lodges. And then there are some clinics outside of the reserve in the villages, which you can use for, you know, if you've got a minor issue that you need to go and have sorted out, you can. But if you break a leg or get bitten by a mamba or something like that, you've got to get to Nelspruit, which is about 2.5 hours away. By car.
It appears as though we've lost James temporarily, and it seems, although it is wonderful to have Wendy back up and running, it seems as though she comes with one or two tech issues to be sorted out, and then we'll fix those as quickly as possible. In the meantime, I was just thinking about James Richards' question about what amazing things we saw in Kruger. And I have to tell you that as amazing as our animal sightings were, and we did have incredibly good luck, at the same time, for me, what really stood out was the most phenomenal scenery I have ever seen in Kruger. It's an area that I've never personally been to, right up to the north there, along the Luvuvu River. and I saw trees that made my jaws drop. The baobabs, those enormous baobab trees, which I'm sure many of you know about, and of course we're a little bit too far south to actually see them, but trees thousands of years old, gigantic jackalberries that look like, that make even the biggest jackalberry on Djuma, like the ones at Twin Dams, make them look like absolute babies in comparison. And this stunning nyala trees. Now that's also a tree species that you don't see many of. I don't even think there's one on Djuma, to be completely honest. If there is, I haven't found it yet. But these, I don't know how to describe, they're picture book trees. Enormous, great sweeping boughs. Really something phenomenal to see. And to look at the thick riverine vegetation and to see buffalo. There was an enormous herd of buffalo, but just all you could see were these little heads poking out of the bush. And the animals as well. There's something so distinctly wild about them. They don't see that many cars, they don't see that many people. And to spend a bit of time there was fascinating. And also the history of the area. So we went up to a place known as Crook's Corner. Now Crook's Corner was a beacon that sat and sort of in the no man's land between South Africa, Zimbabwe and Mozambique. So essentially outside of anyone's jurisdiction. And the story goes, there. Oh, nope. As soon as you stop, they run. There's a pair of grey duiker, or common duiker. But yes, Crook's Corner is apparently where all of the crooks, the bad guys, used to go. The elephant ivory smugglers and the black market traders. They used to go there, and when the authorities were after them, they used to go and sit on the beacon. This is the way the story goes. They would go and sit on the beacon and laugh at the authorities of the different countries, fighting over whose jurisdiction they fell into. Or they'd go across, for example, if they were being pursued by South African authorities, they'd go across into Mozambique, sit behind the beacon and wave at them. And that was the history and the story behind Crook's Corner, the place where the Limpopo flows past, although unfortunately not flowing at the moment. But in theory, the great grey, greasy Limpopo flows past that divides three enormous and incredibly diverse countries. I'm making my way towards Sydney's dam to find out whether anything's decided to go and have a drink. In the meantime, James is back up and running and still with the buffalo at Djuma Dam.
Okay, we've just come around here to where there is some more signal. Here come the rest of the buffalo now. They're coming across the dam. We're quite close to them, so I'm going to talk very quietly, which I hope will still be audible wherever you happen to be sitting on planet Earth. But they've become a lot more confiding, but you can see they're still trying to smell us, their noses in the air, trying to pick us up, see what we're about, why are we here, trying desperately to get a whiff. And we were chatting about smell earlier on. A buffalo's a classic example. They can see us. They see us just about every day. They know what we are. But if the wind turns and they smell human being, they immediately get a fright. This is really cool. Check how many there are coming now. I think this is just amazing. How many do we think? Probably about 200 here now? Not quite that many. Ooh, very nice question, Gavin. You say, why is it that animals out here are referred to as game? Has it got to do with hunting? Does it stem from hunting? Yes, Gavin, I think it does. I think that's absolutely correct. It stems from a hunting term. And it's a little bit like the term Big Five. It's entirely a hunting term. In my mind, it belongs in the scrap heap of history, but it's still used endlessly by people who market safaris, the big five. We have to see the big five. And of course the big five referred to the animals that were the most dangerous to hunt. And we've, because of that, come up with this notion that animals out here are dangerous. That buffalo are dangerous animals to be around. And that's just ridiculous. Buffalo are only dangerous if you try and shoot them, or if you happen to be a lion, if you try and hunt them, then they are very dangerous. So yes, game from hunting. These wonderful chaps. So a breeding herd of buffalo, just to give you an idea of what the sort of social situation here is, mixed herd of males and females and their youngsters. Often the females will have some kind of relationship to each other. They may or may not be related, but quite often they are. And then the males within a herd like this will be variously dominant and not dominant. So there is a hierarchy of dominance. But very interestingly, I think what you'll find is that even the most dominant males will not be able to manipulate breeding opportunities. And so if you are a young buffalo and you can keep your nose out of trouble and you don't get into too much conflict with the dominant bulls, you probably still have some mating opportunities. And normally what happens, it's what I quite like about it, it's like a democracy, where they decide where to move based on a kind of consensus. Normally what will happen is a pathfinding female, normally an old female will wander off in one direction, then she'll come back to the group, and maybe another old female will wander off in another direction, then she'll come back to the group, and then based on a consensus they'll all wander off in one direction together. Females at the front, babies in the middle, males normally then fringing these flanks and outs and back side of the herd in order to protect it from attack. The tiny little one there, Gendry. Very small. Oh, sorry. Catherine, do you want to know if the buffalo wander in and out or if they stay at Djuma? Remember, Djuma is only 1,500 hectares. In fact, Djuma itself is probably only 900 hectares. And so for a buffalo home range, they wouldn't be able to survive on an area this small, so they do definitely go in and out. And what you find is they spend a lot of time on Biffle's Hook. They spend quite a lot of time, I think, on Torchwood, and then they'll come wandering on here and then go back out to the north, sometimes a little bit to the south of here. So they're probably operating on an area of about, I'd say 10,000 hectares, which is 24,000 acres. That'll be the average home range of a herd of buffalo like this. This is not a big herd. I mean, it's big for this particular area simply because we don't see big herds of buffalo like this. But you do find far, far larger herds of buffalo in the general area. I mean, I've seen a herd of 1,000 strong once just up north of here. That was in the winter time. And normally, I mean, we're kind of in a winter situation here with concentrated water everywhere, very little grazing. And the buffalo have still managed to maintain condition, but if you look around at all of them now, you can start to see that their hips are starting to show. Now that is a sign simply of the fact that the drought is beginning to take its toll. And as I've said before, this particular time of the year, yes, the animals are going to feel it a bit, but it's not now that we're really going to feel the effects of the drought. It's as we go into winter, when we know that there won't be any rain, when the growth season is over, where even if we do get rain, there will hardly be a flush of grass. It's then that we're going to feel the effects of this. Now, Lois, you are in Buffalo. Lois, you want to know if the buffalo have come here out of habit to the water? Yes, they know where water is. The older females, the pathfinders, will lead them to where the different bits of water are. They will know where all the water holes of the area are. They will know where the natural pans are. So if there is a big rain, they will know exactly where to get that fresh rain rather than coming to a pan like this, which after one visit from a herd of buffalo this side is going to become a soup of dung and urine. Nice question, Lois. It's absolutely what will happen. Just listen to the oxpeckers calling. Hello, Peter. In the United Kingdom, you say one of the males was drooling some saliva. Is he okay? Is he perhaps ill? Perhaps rabid? Peter, it's totally normal for buffalo. If you watch cattle sometimes, you'll see them doing the same thing. They will drool. And I think it's got a lot to do, Peter, with the fact that they do regurgitate their food. And so what happens is I think there's a lot of saliva produced during that process. And they do produce a lot of saliva, and sometimes it just kind of drips out. If they're sick, I think you'd see a lot more seeping from the nose. Generally, you know, the mucus producing glands in the nose would start to leak. And I mean, if they've got bovine tuberculosis and it's taking hold, I mean, they can carry it. All of these buffalo will carry bovine TB, but if that's actually affecting them, they'll start to get snotty nose and they'll start to cough a lot. But I don't think the dripping of saliva is necessarily a sign of illness. I do see it quite a lot, Peter. It is very well noticed, however. I'm impressed you noticed that. This cow here was just dripping some saliva as well. Very nice. Finally, he's returned to us, Sibusiso from Hammanskraal. Haven't heard from you for a very long time. Very good to have you back with us, Sibusiso. You want to know if a buffalo's horns keep growing all the time, or if they stop growing? I think what you'll find is they do keep growing slowly. They will definitely slow down though, and then when the buffalo gets very old, they'll stop growing. So I've seen some, I mean, until a bull is probably 10 or 11 years old, his horns will keep growing, and he's got a potential lifespan in this area of up to 16 or so. This one cow is very fascinated by us. She's trying to smell Gendre. Oh, she didn't like that, Gendre, did she? Now, Trail X, you think that they think we are part of the herd. I don't think that. I've definitely had that experience with buffalo before, where they just do seem to think that you're part of the herd. But here, the moment, they just keep looking at us, you know, they're very surprised by us. They don't like the smell of us. One of them's laying down, so perhaps relaxing a little bit. You can see the water there coming out. That's because this pan is pumped, and so that will at least provide some kind of dilution to the amazing suite of macronutrients and micronutrients, that they put into the water. No doubt result in an algal bloom, an attack of insects, which in turn will enthrall the terrapins that live in the water there. And Kevin Catfish, you were probably with us yesterday when we were watching this herd, commenting on the fact that there didn't seem to be many oxpeckers around it. And you're saying that you can hear them all, and there are lots about now. There are lots of oxpeckers today. Maybe yesterday was an oxpecker public holiday. I'm not sure why there weren't any about, but you can see one there on the back of the female on your screen, hopping about, a red-billed oxpecker. It's a good idea to just keep looking out for a yellow-billed variety. We do get them around here, especially around this pan. Much more rare than the red-billed friend. And supposedly that relationship is a classic example of a symbiosis where one animal survives off the other, but that they both benefit from the situation. Looks more and more, or it sometimes looks like, and I think there are a lot of biologists who would agree with this, that it is a parasitic relationship where the oxpecker is actually getting quite a lot more out of the relationship than the buffalo are. Yes, the buffalo have the ticks taken off them, but if there's an injury, the oxpeckers definitely keep it open, and for a long time we thought, well, maybe that just keeps it clean of bacteria, and actually it's quite a good thing for the buffalo. But I think studies have shown that it isn't necessarily, and that it actually becomes the site of infection. So it can be a bit of a parasitic relationship, which is interesting because it's normally held out as the most obvious example of an animal symbiosis. It's a good word for the morning, Jean-Ray, don't you think? Symbiosis. Yeah. Would you like to say it?
Symbiosis.
There we go. Well done. Symbiosis. One young bull at the back, a big adult in the middle, and then two ladies in the front. They've been going on a little double date. Let's head across to Jamie, see what she's got for you. I'll spend a little bit more time with these buffalo, and then we'll see what else we can find.
Interestingly enough, my plan is actually at some point to go and join those buffalo as well. We've got the ball of GoPros on the front, our virtual reality rig. And we've been trying to put together different clips to show you that will give you the most incredible ability. And most of you by now, I think, would have seen some of the clips that we've produced. But basically, it gives you the ability to look, and depending on what device you are using, whether it's a smartphone or one of the iPads, you can actually move around and decide where you want to look in that particular clip. So at some point, because big animals work particularly well with this particular setup, at some point we're going to wander across and go and do a little bit of a segment with the virtual reality rig. In the meantime, I've just been re-exploring Djuma, getting acquainted with the lie of the land. It's amazing how much you miss in 10 days. When you're out every day, twice a day, you get to know roughly where all of the animals are. You get an idea of what everything's up to. When you go away, you almost instantly lose that grasp of what's happening around you. Particularly for me, doing this gives me a nice opportunity to see just how much groundwater there is in terms of possible drinking sources, and where the animals might decide to go, because clearly there's not enough groundwater for a big herd of buffalo like that. They have to go to the pumped pan. Yesterday afternoon as well, we saw, I mentioned that animals were pushing in more and more from Kruger, and yesterday afternoon Brent and I were out on tracking team, and as we drove up to the Djuma pan, there was an elephant bull drinking there, and he was very, very clearly a Kruger elephant. And I'm talking about not necessarily the main busy parts of Kruger. I'm talking one of the big wide expanses, and there are huge expanses of unexplored territory within Kruger National Park itself. And this elephant was so skittish. He didn't run away, but he clearly was uncomfortable with the vehicle, and it took him a long time, much longer than the usual elephants that we see around here. It took him a long time to get used to our presence. But he was very much enjoying the fresh water that was coming through from the pan. Now, although this drought is at times heartbreaking to see, it is going to present us with all kinds of new and, in a way, fascinating sightings, the way that we can observe how the animals adapt and change. What fascinated me about that entire trip through Kruger is, in theory, the northern section of Kruger is the driest section there is, and yet it is the complete opposite at the moment. They've clearly had far more rain than any of the southern areas, including Djuma. It's bright green. The buffalo are looking fit, they're looking healthy. When you compare it to the buffalo and the zebra further south that are starting already to show signs of not distress, but definitely a lot of them losing condition. And what happens with the animals when they start, particularly with, for example, something like a buffalo, maybe even with the warthog as well, a lot of the buffalo carry tuberculosis, but they don't really suffer from the symptoms of it. A healthy buffalo will be able to live a nice, long and happy life without being concerned about the symptoms of TB. But as soon as they start to lose condition, as soon as they lose a bit of weight, that tuberculosis kicks in and they become very ill animals. And I think my prediction is that we're going to be seeing more and more of that over the next few months. Now, I loop back towards the Zinyala, The buffalo have made their way to go and have a drink at the dam, so let's pop over and have a look.
Buffalo drinking water that you and I would scarcely put our toes in, let alone agree to put in our mouths. Doesn't affect the buffalo at all, doesn't affect any of the animals, and they're amazing, especially the predators will come and drink really muddy, foul kind of soupy water that would leave you with a case of serious amoebic dysentery, and just doesn't affect the animals out here. Their stomachs can cope with it. They have the constitution of a hyena, or like Brent Leo Smith. I think Brent could probably drink this stuff too and he'd be okay, but for the rest of us it wouldn't be possible. Jean-Andre, if you don't mind looking at this one here, this last straggling cow, and by straggling I just mean she's not with the rest of the herd, she's got grey hair. You see, she's got little specks of grey on her. Experienced old lady who's wandered the wilderness probably for the last 15 years or so. She's looking pretty good nick though, but she's the first buffalo I've ever seen that's got that obvious spotting of grey hair. Now the rest of the herd has walked off into the east and south. I think they will probably settle down in that block there where they are now. They'll graze a little, settle down there, lie in the shade and chew their cud for much of the rest of the day. It's quite nice to see her running after the rest of the herd. She doesn't look like the most athletic lady in the world, but why would she? She's now greying, experienced and grizzled. And here goes the bull after them. Do you think this is like the sort of grandfatherly or grandparently couple, Jean-Andre? Maybe? Granddad and grandma. Now, although neither of them looked like they were particularly impressive athletes as they were running along there, let me assure you that when push comes to shove, they will move with a great speed, and they still both contain incredible strength. Even though they look like they're slightly arthritic. Right, we're going to leave the buffalo going off into the southeast. I'm going to go back towards quarantine clearing, see if I can't find my little baby zebra friend, and let's go to some Nyala with Jamie.
I'm trying to, this might actually be the best position. A huge herd, comparatively, of Nyala. There's about 10 or 11 all moving through the bushes together. Interesting, I've never seen Nyala herds in the same way I have here. There's a male in front. You see the difference in size and color once the females start to come through. There they are. The tan-colored female on the left, or several tan-colored females on the left, and the much darker, much larger male at the back. I think our best position is going to be to go backwards. He's having a jolly good sniff. See if there's any possibility of females in estrus. Oh, let's try there. Lots of mixed ages. There's a couple of young males that still have the tan female coloring. Now to go back to the stripe question, because we discussed it with the zebra, this is one example of where stripes really do serve a disruptive coloration purpose. So those stripes, you can see now as we look at them through the trees, you can see how the stripes disrupt the shape of the animal, and basically instead of camouflaging it, essentially break up the outline so that it becomes more difficult for predators to pick out individual antelope. Works very well if you're looking at them through the bushes like this, and gives them a much better chance of escaping unscathed from a predator attack. There's the overeager male, looking for an opportunity. He'd better be quick though, because I definitely saw another big male and it looked larger than him wandering through. If we try to that, I don't even know if there's a collective noun for a herd of Nyala. More interesting than a herd. Awesome in the morning light. couple of youngsters moving about in the front. And of course, if we really wanted to, we could identify each individual Inyala by the stripe pattern. So every single Inyala has a different stripe pattern. With the male in hot pursuit. Quickly. That's awesome. I don't think I've had an Inyala sighting like that. Let's try and get ahead of him. There we go. And you watch them disappear into fairly dense vegetation. Generally, when we do see Inyala, they're hidden away in this type of bush. They much prefer the denser habitats. Oops, somebody startled there. So they generally prefer the drainage line systems, somewhere where they can hide rather than be out in the open. And it's one of the reasons, it's one of the interesting explanations behind the difference between the males and the females. For the males, that flashy coloration and those big horns are necessary as part of a reproductive strategy. So essentially for wooing the females and intimidating other males and chasing them away. But for the females, that is completely unnecessary. They don't need horns for protection because they hide away and rely rather on their cryptic coloration and their camouflage. There's the other male. Wondered where he was. I knew I'd seen two somewhere. And that particular male, unfortunately, he's disappeared before I could show you, but his horns are absolutely covered in mud. And you very often see that. Now, Inyalas breed all year round, so the males have to be in fighting form throughout the year. What they often do is rub their faces in mud. Nobody actually really knows why they do this. It's one of those strange little idiosyncrasies of nature. We know that they've got glands around their eyes, so that might have something to do with it, sort of passing the scent, putting their scent down on the ground. But they specifically target muddy and watery areas. And they often come up with thick layers of mud around the horns. And there's one theory that actually suggests that it makes them look even bigger and more intimidating. I have to be honest though, I personally think it makes them look a little bit silly. The Inyalas have vanished off down into the drainage line where they like to be. I'm not sure if we ever actually figured out which antelope species Karula managed to kill yesterday. I know that when we were there, I personally, Brent and I had a slight disagreement. He said it looked like an impala. I said it looked more like a bushbuck. Look at that, they're actually having a drink. There's water there. Try go. That's maybe as good as it's gonna get. Drinking in one of the mud wallows. Little fluffy tails. And that flash of white. Now, just to finish off a discussion that we were having about the drought, or to continue a discussion we were having about the drought, the one thing that we're going to also start seeing, apart from slightly more cases of TB, there's always the possibility of anthrax, and that's something that is a naturally occurring bacteria in this particular area, but you hardly ever see it except in times, or see it taking action except in times of drought. And drought, when the animals start to graze closer to the soil, a lot of the sort of top layers of soil have been blown away, the spores start to be ingested. And at this point, we've spoken about it before, if we find an animal carcass where it's not immediately clear that it's been killed by a predator, we're absolutely going to avoid it. And that's because anthrax is transmissible to human beings, as I'm sure most of you know. But Ramey was wondering, what happens if there is an anthrax outbreak in the area? Would we move? Would people move to a different area? And the answer is generally not, no. What you do is you call in experts who come in their special hazmat suits, specially designed to be impervious to the anthrax spores, and they come and they dispose of the carcass in a way that prevents the spread further. That being said, unless you are actually actively touching and breathing in parts of that carcass, and unless it is a very, very fresh anthrax death, for the most part, as soon as a carcass starts to decompose, the natural decomposition bacteria that occur in all of those processes immediately outcompete the anthrax bacteria. So it's not that easy for anthrax to spread from a carcass to a human being unless you are actually handling it, if you are touching the blood or the saliva, or if you're breathing in close to it. So people are always a lot more careful, but generally it's not something that is a huge risk in this particular area. And I personally, even though I've been around for a couple of anthrax outbreaks, I cannot think of one person who's been naturally infected by anthrax in this area in these kind of circumstances. It is something that is a distinct possibility. We could see it in the next few weeks. And it might have been, I mentioned that we saw a couple of dead buffalo within Kruger. Personally, I think they were probably they lost condition, they didn't get enough food, they were probably old and weak to begin with. But it could also have been anthrax-related deaths. We've spoken a lot before. For tiny fenced reserves and for farmers and for the general population, this drought is a terrible thing. That being said, within the Kruger area itself, within our 4 million hectares of unfenced wilderness area, it's actually not going to do damage that the ecosystem can't recover from. Sorry, Dave, put you at a bit of an angle there. There's a stunning Inyala bull hiding in their favorite places. That must be about 20 different individual Inyala we've seen in this group. He's following behind the ladies. As we move on, we've seen a really nice clear distinction between the males and the female Inyala. And it's it's an enormous size difference. They've actually got the greatest sexual dimorphism of any of the antelope species. It's one of the reasons why the division happens between the different naming of the different animals. So with anything smaller, anything the size of a Inyala female or smaller is referred to either as a ram or a ewe. So Impala, for example, are rams and ewes. But anything the size of an Inyala male and larger will be referred to as a cow and a bull. So kudu cow or kudu bull. It's where that distinction happens in the naming of the antelope males and females. But that is a tremendous, it's probably about double the size in terms of the difference. And Harper was wondering, since that is such a clear, there's such enormous animals, would a leopard be able to take one down? Because Harper suggested it seems unlikely. It is actually unlikely. It is possible. I have seen it happen before. It would be a very, very big male leopard. So an animal like Tingana or the Anderson male has been known to kill small giraffe before. And that is a seriously large animal. And there are a couple of recorded cases of leopards also killing buffalo calves. So an Inyala bull would be on the menu. I don't think a leopard of Karula's size would be up to the challenge. And I don't think that she'd actually risk it. For her, it's not worth the risk. There's big horns, thrashing hooves, and that's an enormous pig. My goodness, that's a big warthog. No, don't go away, please, boy. We want to look at how enormous you are. Look at those huge tusks. Off he goes. Another interesting, and I keep harping back to the leave I've just been on, but obviously it's fresh in my memory. Sandblaster was wondering, since human beings have been in this area for thousands and thousands of years, are there any archaeological sites within Djuma and Arathusa? Not specifically. I've just come from a place known as Tulamela, or just south of Tulamela, which was part of an ancient late Iron Age civilization, all connected to a place called Mapungubwe, sitting up in the triangle A lot of you might have seen that famous golden rhino statue that came from that archaeological site, the Mapungubwe heritage site, but it's connected to the same civilization that then moved across to Tulamela. And Tulamela had very interesting social structures. It had essentially a king that lived separated from the rest of his citizens, and then a village built all around him in a way that is actually still almost traditionally practiced by a lot of the vendor people of that area. In terms of what you could find here, however, that does not mean that there's nothing here. We've been speaking about it because Brent and myself were wandering through the reserve that his parents lived on, and we actually saw something in Kruger as well. There are so many relics of a time in which people moved through here in a much more primitive fashion, if you could call it that. So you'd be able to find stone cutting tools, and we could do a walk through here, and there is a very good chance that we could actually find them. You just have to know what to look for, and you just have to be specifically really focusing on looking for that. You very often find grinding stones. I found quite a few of those, so big flat stones that have been used to grind millet, a type of carbohydrate. There goes our pig again. This poor pig. I'm not trying to follow you, boy. Oh, James has found an interesting bird. Let's go and have a look.
I'll see it.
This is so exciting, everybody. I know this isn't a great picture. I'm going to try and get you a closer picture, but for those of you who keep bird lists, this bird is not on most of your lists. It's a Bennett's woodpecker. It's one of the 4 woodpecker species that we get here. It's the least common, and I originally spotted it because it is, Jean-Andre, feeding on the
Ground.
Correct. A Bennett's woodpecker is a ground-feeding woodpecker. Very nice. Now, I'm going to try and get a little bit closer. We are not, of course, with the super zoom lens. So let's see if we can ease our way a little bit closer to that special bird. There's lots of bird activity here, which makes me think that there are probably termites and things coming out of the ground. Jean-Andre, can you still see him?
Yeah.
Yeah, there he is. I'm not going to go any closer than this. There we go. Just pulled off. Bennett's woodpecker. I will show you a picture. But there he is. Believe it. Very obvious black moustachial streak. Black mask around the eyes. Small red cap. Very nice, Jean-Andre. See? Hop, hop, hopping on the ground. I'll even play you the call. Such is my magnanimity. You say that word, Jean-Andre? Magnanimity. It's not an easy one.
Magnanimity.
Yeah, sort of. Okay. Let's have a look here. Now, unless I'm very much mistaken, he's that one there. The female bearded woodpecker, not bearded, female Bennett's woodpecker there. Very cool. Nice, huh? Is he still there? I'm going to have one more look, just in case I'm making a mistake. I'm 90% sure I'm not. It's only the Bennetts I know that feeds on the ground, and it did look very much like that, but those moustachial streaks just didn't look quite black enough, at least brown enough. Has he gone?
I don't see him.
I don't see him either. I think he's gone. We're going to call Bennett's on that. And anybody who would like to dispute it is welcome to, but I'm pretty sure that's what we had there. I'll play you the call quickly, and we'll just see if he doesn't call back. Now, there can sometimes be a bit of concern over playing bird calls. I don't have a problem with it as long as you don't harass the birds. So let's just quickly see Field guide, woodpecker, spelled w-o-o-d-t-ecker. Got him. Right, here we go. Bennett's play sound. So we'll just play it once. Stop and see if we get a reply. Or a response of any kind. No, nothing. Nothing at all. Very cool. Yeah. And that, I think, if I was to show you the picture there, it was a female Bennett. I'm pretty sure like that. You happy with that, John Doe?
Yes.
Good. There we go. Very nice. And Lucy, you're in South Bend, Indiana. You say that is number 183 for you. Well done, Lucy. Good. Marvelous. Well, that's a turn up for the books. Now, I suspect quite strongly that you're going to lose signal as soon as I leave here. So if we do, I'm sorry about that. But we're going to head down south to where signal should be a bit stronger, towards Impala Plains. The plains of Impala. Kirsten says we're still okay signal-wise for now. Beautiful skies, lovely clouds, different levels of clouds all over, which just makes the kind of sky broken up into beautiful kind of definition. Hello, Vincent in Ohio. You're an ornithologist and you want to know about the species of heron that we get here. Well, the most interesting one so far found was recently found by Scott. That's the black-crowned night heron. We get those. We get the grey heron. We would find maybe in a wet year a green-backed heron. Well, certainly down on the river you find green-backed heron. You find little bittern down, which is a kind of heron, down on the rivers. What else would we find? Goliath heron down there. We find 3 species of egret, and the egrets are basically herons. So the great white egret, the cattle egret, and the little egret. We find all of those here. I think that's probably about it.
Night heron?
Well, black-crowned night heron, yeah. You would probably also find the other night heron, the which is now white-backed night heron. Yes, white-backed night heron. How have I forgotten this? Black-crowned night heron and I think it's white-backed night heron. That's correct. So we've got the 2 night herons. We've got the grey heron, which is the kind of standard issue heron, a Goliath heron, which is a very large standard issue heron, the 3 egret species. So that takes us to 8 species of heron. We've got the green-backed, the little bitten, and maybe a dwarf bitten as well. Maybe, no, not a squawker. So we've got almost 10 species of heron. Very nice, Vincent. Let's go back to Jamie, get an update from her. We'll catch you on the other side of Impala Plains.
And just to continue on with our conversation that you've been having with James about birds, I was just thinking about our time in Kruger again, but the fact that we saw in the north, we saw more yellow-billed oxpeckers than we did red-billed oxpeckers. Now, for conservationists, that is a really impressive recovery of a population that was essentially extinct in this area. It's one of those wonderful conservation success stories where yellow-billed oxpeckers were reintroduced into an area. The reason that they suffered so badly and why the population took such an enormous dive was actually the introduction of pesticides. So we were talking earlier about the tsetse flies around the zebra and the fact that we no longer see them in this area, and that was initially because of the DDTs that were introduced to push mosquitoes and tsetse flies further north towards the Limpopo River and away from human habitation. one of the reasons why it took the sort of the western colonies far longer to make their way into this particular area, and why there's such an incredible history like the one we were talking about earlier. Because the local people actually got to enjoy this area before being pushed out by colonizing powers. But yes, the introduction of DDTs and the effect that it has, because of course it doesn't discriminate between good insects and bad insects, and will affect ticks, flies and mosquitoes alike, as well as anything right down to the dung beetles and the millipedes. And it had a tremendous knock-on effect in terms of the actual wildlife. I think we picked up a passenger, and by that I mean I think I've driven over a stick that's now clinging to the bottom of the car. Maybe not. I think we managed to dislodge it. This morning I accidentally smacked Dave in the face. He's actually been very forgiving. I accidentally smacked poor old Dave in the face. He was looking over to try and see if we could get the branch out of the wheels, and it flicked up and smacked him. There's all kinds of dangers out here, from blister beetles to flying sticks. Safari Dean, just to continue on with our oxpecker discussion, was wondering if oxpeckers and rhino are symbiotic, since oxpeckers could potentially warn rhino of impending danger. The best thing that they do for the rhino is the same for the buffalo, and that is to remove those itchy, terrible ticks. And rhino do get very serious, or really uncomfortable, let's rephrase it that way, very uncomfortable tick infestations, particularly around the tender, soft areas, the nose, the ears, and underneath the tail. The oxpeckers help them out like that, but yes, that's a good point. They could actually warn the rhino of impending danger. And it's a very useful way when you are walking in the bush to be warned either way that there is a large animal. It could be anything from a giraffe to an impala, but it could also be a buffalo or a rhino as you're walking through. You hear oxpeckers dislodged, you generally know that there's something ahead of you. Very, very useful. You can actually watch them and look where they land and use them to follow, which is interesting yesterday with that little elephant that I was telling you about, that young elephant bull that had obviously come in from Kruger. And the oxpeckers, because they eat 1,000 ticks a day, they get very thirsty and they spend a lot of time around water. And they were trying to, they'd obviously come to Djuma Dam for a drink, and they were trying to settle down on the elephant. And every time they did, the elephant would swat it with their trunk. And that's why we never see that symbiotic relationship. And speaking of birds, James has found more. Let's pop over there.
Well, we were looking at there's another one. A golden-backed or European bee-eater. It's flown away now. Oh, how irritating. But there is a little beautiful singing magpie shrike over there, and then on the ground there were a whole lot of wattled starlings. For those who haven't seen, we're just going to sneak forward and see if we can't get them. There they go. Some red-billed, but there's a red-billed buffalo weaver as well in that tree. But there was a whole flock of those starlings. Let's go a bit forward and see if we can't get him. Oh, there they are. Gendry, they're on the top right-hand side of this knobthorn tree over here. You'll see them. Well done. Good job. And the bee-eaters are still around. There are the wattled starlings, everybody. A very interesting starling species, a nomad, not always found here, but they are around now. There you can see them, and you can hear the bee-eaters going bloop, 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 just above us. And then way up above, there's a vulture. If you are ever in a position where you feel bereft, upset, sad, miserable, melancholic, might I suggest that you take the time to go and lie down in a clearing somewhere and watch the flight of an eagle or a vulture above you, with total silence around. It is the best possible way to contemplate the realities of life, I find. Of course, if you live in New York, that's going to be difficult. So, Ravi, I wouldn't suggest you go outside and lie on the street and try and see a vulture. I think that will result in increased stress and more sadness. Would you say, Jean-Ray?
Quite so.
Then there was a woodland kingfisher that flew into this tree here. I find watching swallows and swifts has the same effect. Flew off, didn't it, Jean-Ray? Dirty bird. Let us carry on. Now, there seems to be quite a lot going on in this clearing. I wonder if there isn't some kind of insect emergence. There was also a humble dove around here. Now, the humble dove is quite interesting. It's a seed-eating bird. And unlike the seed-eating birds like finches, which have a specially designed beak to bite off the husks of the seeds that they eat, the dove and the sandgrass will just swallow the seeds whole. And in the stomach, of course, is something called a gizzard, which is a muscular pouch that's often got stones in it as well to help digest food. And that gizzard will basically remove dehusk the seed within the stomach, which I think is an amazing adaptation. Having a built-in dehusker in your stomach. Let's go a little bit quicker. There's a nice clearing around the corner here that I just want to have a look at. See if there aren't one or two birds there. Some butterflies coming out as the air starts to warm. Impalas are running across the road. So Ravi in New York, another good one. You say, wouldn't I say that the ecosystem is basically a giant example of symbiotic relationships where everything from this, I'm paraphrasing here, from the size of bacteria up to the most enormous mammals that we have up here contribute to each other's survival. Yes, I suppose I would say that, but let us not discount, of course, that balance is also maintained by pathogens and parasites, and the numbers of which are intimidating if you actually start to look at it. But they too play a crucial role in maintaining what is, we call it a balanced ecosystem, but certainly an ecosystem of dynamic balance, if you like. So it is constantly changing, but there is this sort of dynamic balance that stops it tipping over towards any one direction. And yes, the bacteria, the protozoans, the parasites, the ticks, the elephants, the termites, the antelope, the predators, they all keep it going in this kind of dynamic balance. Nothing in this clearing, which is distressing to my person. And well, just a few minutes left of this drive. So we'll drive along here, past what we were hoping was going to be a productive mongoose den that we went past yesterday 3 times. Failed to find any mongooses there, but we did eventually get some, and I'd like to see Scott's footage of the mongoose. I think he got some really good stuff yesterday with his GoPro. He's tremendously skilled at that sort of thing. Skills, unfortunately, will be sorely missed when he moves on, alas, tomorrow. Just a reminder, we will be having a short fireside chat this evening from about what would it be? About 6:30. And that's where Scott will share a couple of highlights of his time here at Wild Earth. Don't forget, a real treat this afternoon. Nikki and Scott will be taking the drive together, which will be very nice indeed. All right, that's it from us. Thank you, Jean-Andre, for your efforts. Thank you for putting up with me today. A very nice drive. Thank you to all of you for your questions and comments. Big thank you to Kirsten, of course, in the final control with Louise. And we'll hand you back over to Jamil, refreshed back from her leave, being filmed, who's filming Jamil, by David. And we'll see you this afternoon at 4 o'clock. Bye-bye.
Refreshed and thrilled to be back. Thank you all once again for your wonderful words of welcome. I'm very happy to be back with you once again and exploring the wildernesses of Djuma and Arathusa. Unfortunately, our buffalo herd has escaped us. We were going to try and do a virtual reality segment, but they appear to have run off into the bushes somewhere. I'm just going across for one last checkup on Gallagher Waterhole, Gallagher Pan. If maybe there's a chance we might catch them there. Otherwise, sorry Dave, we didn't manage this time around. We had a couple of comments to say that from people saying we're surprised that we spend our leave visiting the bush when we live in the bush. But there's something incredibly refreshing about seeing a different aspect, and we were so lucky to have the Kruger on our doorstep to explore the different variety of such an enormous area and to view it from different perspectives. It gives you a really unique outlet, a sort of outlook on what's happening around you. It gives you a different level of understanding of the bush that you work in and the bush that we work in from a day-to-day basis. Be a very big positive. But yes, it was time to come back. It was time to go back out on a proper game drive, taking Rusty on my maiden voyage. Oh, Dave, no buffalo. Oh well, we tried. Next time. And I'm very glad to have spent my first, or most of my first morning back with the wonderful spotted hyenas, rushing about the den. There's nothing more special than that. And as we come to the conclusion of our sunrise safari, the temperatures are starting to heat up. Just like to say a big thank you to all of you, as always, for jumping on the back of the vehicle and joining us and sending through some really interesting, fascinating questions. It's wonderful to build up a viewership and to get people to go further into the detailed things. Thank you, Dave, and thank you to the ladies in FC. Guys, don't forget, this evening will be Scott's last drive. He will be out on drive with Nikki on camera, and we will be having a special fireside farewell chat for him this evening. Very sad. But don't forget to join us. We'll catch you then. Have a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, and we will see you a little bit later for the sunset safari. Cheers, guys.